afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us all today. I'm absolutely delighted to co-host this event with the Minister of International Cooperation for the Arab Republic of Egypt, Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, on this critical shared priority for the UK and Egypt in our COP presidencies. Women, girls, and marginalized people are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And we also know that they are often excluded from decision-making practices around climate change. However, women and girls are also critical leaders and agents of change in climate action. Policies that consider the needs, talents, and voices of women can enhance economic opportunities by creating quality jobs for all. And that is why the UK has been taking an inclusive approach in our COP26 presidency, prioritising the advancement of gender equality within climate action. This included driving the implementation of the UNFCCC Gender Action Plan. At COP Gender Day, we made our commitment to this goal clear by announcing £165 million in funding to simultaneously tackle gender inequality and climate change. And that includes investing up to £45 million in the Community Resilience Partnership Programme to support grassroots women's groups to adapt to climate change. The UK is also a commitment maker under the Generation Equality Forum Action Coalition on Feminist Action for Climate Justice, which is co-led by Costa Rica and the Maldives. Our commitments include empowering women and girls within a just transition to a green economy, which is the focus of today's discussion. I'm also delighted that Her Excellency, Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, closed our presidency's COP Gender Day event by setting out Egypt's commitment to gender-responsive climate action. And she joins me here today as my co-host, and we're really looking forward to Egypt's COP27 presidency. The growing green economy presents a huge opportunity for women. However, the evidence shows that most of the new sectors are currently male-dominated, with educational, social, economic, and legal barriers preventing women to actively and equally participate. And that is why it's important that we promote women's inclusion in all aspects of this transition. The UK is supporting businesses to understand and address the twin challenge of climate change and women's economic empowerment. At COP26, the UK, through our Work and Opportunities for Women, WOW programme, launched the Women and Net Zero Economy Toolkit. This toolkit provides practical guidance to businesses on supporting women in their supply chains. Women's meaningful leadership will help to ensure that climate funding addresses women's different needs, builds their agency, promotes climate innovation, and delivers more inclusive and sustainable climate, environmental, and business outcomes. We continue to encourage industry-led initiatives such as Powerful Women and Equal by 30 to ensure that there is an equal opportunity for all to work in the green economy. Quality education is a critical enabler to allow girls to participate in the green economy and a key element of our climate response. But across the developing world, countries are facing a learning crisis. A staggering 9 out of 10 girls in low-income countries are unable to read by the end of primary school. Without developing foundational skills of literacy and numeracy at primary school, these girls stand little chance of benefiting from a just transition. And that is why, as G7 president last year, the UK secured commitment to get 40 million more girls into school, with 20 million more girls reading by the age of 10. We hosted the Global Education Summit, raising more than $4 billion, delivering a major financial boost to children's educational opportunities. And just last week, the UK Prime Minister launched the Girls' Education Skills Partnership Initiative, which is an innovative new £20 million partnership between the UK government and major global businesses to provide 21st century skills training and STEM education to 1 million girls and women. Supporting women and girls is not just the right thing to do. It's also beneficial to businesses and society as a whole. Building resilience in businesses by being better able to absorb climate shocks and promoting recovery from such shocks to avoid poverty traps and any widening of inequality. Both are crucial to allowing a just transition to a green economy. These are just some ideas, but we're keen to encourage a wider conversation, stimulate thinking and learn from each other. And that's why today we've convened a panel representing a range of voices in order to highlight new opportunities to move forward together with renewed energy and determination. And I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed panelists. Tamilore Omojola is a Malala Fund Fellow who's a passionate advocate for girls' education and children's rights. Lebagon Mulese, a Labour Market Policy Coordinator at the Congress of South African Trade Union. Jessica Espinosa is the Chief Executive of the Two Times Collaborative, an industry body launched by the members of the Two Times Challenge to promote gender lens investing. And this has mobilized over $7 billion to date. Brilliant work, Jessica. And Catherine Stewart is the current Director of Corporate Responsibility at Associated British Foods, and until very recently was the Director for Ethical Trade and Sustainability at Primark. So thank you for taking the time out to share your experience and expertise and to participate in what I know will be an enriching discussion. And I'll now hand over to my co-host, Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, to chair the first session. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Minister Vicky, and all the participants. And as you mentioned, the gender and climate agenda is one which is extremely important, and we look forward to our collaboration from COP26 to COP27. Without further ado, our first panel is barriers faced by women and girls to participating in the green economy. And let me start by asking Lubongang, what impact has climate change had on the jobs of the women you represent? And what do you see as their biggest barrier to meaningful participation in the green economy? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for the opportunity to invite the trade union voices so that we can also have a say with this important topic. I think, climate change and women's issues are an important intersectional topic in our society, and is very current, considering the various challenges that the world finds itself in. And I think key to that is the challenge of climate change. So my name is Lebakan Molaisi. I am the Labour Market Policy Coordinator for the Congress of South Africa's Trade Unions. And part of our work is to prepare workers for the future of work. But
I think we might have lost her. She said that she had issues in location. But until we get her back, let me maybe move on to Tamilore. And you're a youth advocate, and you worked on capacity building for women in communities. How does climate change affect and impact women and girls differently? I mean, this distinction between women, girls, and how does this affect their ability to lead and change communities? Go ahead.
Thank you to the ministers. Thank you, FCDO, for this opportunity to be able to speak for girls and to be able to explain some of the realities of women and girls in my community. So my community is a low-income community, and for women and girls in my community, so the first thing you want to see is, or you want to understand is, what exactly do women and girls in my community understand by climate change? Yeah, women in my community and girls, there is winter and summer, but then most times we begin to see changes in the weather, begin to see there is reduced rainfall in the community, begin to see the scarcity of food. These are some of the things that girls and women in my community understand. And most of these issues of reduced rainfall, changes in the weather, very hot seasons, lead to food insecurity in my community. So my community, women are burdened with the responsibility to provide food for the family, for their immediate family. And once there is food scarcity, the burden rests on the women. And we understand that food scarcity is one of the major impacts of climate change in our community. And also in my community, women are very sidelined. They are majorly not included in major decision-making processes. And even in their families, they are not included in major things that take place in the family. They just follow the lead of probably the family member or the leader in the community, whatever the person says. So women do not even have the ability to be able to make critical decisions, even when there are consequences of climate change on them or in their community. And also, when these consequences happen, when women are burdened with provision of food, provision of water in their community, most times the girls in the community or the girls in the family do not get to complete, or they miss school, they miss their education. And we know from data that climate crisis is forcing girls in lower income countries out of school. In 2021 alone, climate change will prevent 4 million girls from completing their education. And we've seen that as the years go on, if climate change is not quickly addressed, about 4.5 million girls will continue to miss school yearly. And if we combine this number together, this is a whole lot. This is a whole lot of girls who will be missing school. We also understand that education is a way to empower women and girls. Once girls and women are empowered, once they have information, once they have education, they are able to make decisions. They are able to provide appropriate solutions. They know where the issues are. They know where the problem pinches. So they are able to provide solutions. And not empowering women and girls in my community leads to them being sidelined. They are not able to lead. Obviously, it's a woman who knows to speak well, who has literacy skills, who has numeracy skills, that is able to join our peers to make decisions. Is a woman who has basic skills, who has basic life skills, that is able to make decisions for her. So from my experience from increasing capacity of women, we've found out that once women are empowered, so majorly I've worked on some projects that empower women to be able to access services, reproductive health services. We notice that once these women are able to access these services, they actually have a change, an outlook, a change in the way they see things. They believe that, yes, they are able to do this, they are able to do that. And majorly, for women in my community, they just need these basic life skills to be able to feel like, yes, I can do this. I'm up to the task. I can take responsibilities. I can make decisions. I can make roles, and they'll be fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think one of the key points, as you point out, for gender and climate action is that when women are empowered in the communities, particularly when it comes to agriculture, the adaptation, which is so much important for Africa, they are actually able to affect communities. So we echo what you mentioned, and thank you for bringing in the statistics that really support that. Since we're talking about numbers and financial means, let me go to Jessica and ask her about the most common barriers that women face for access to climate smart investments, because that is again a very important element. And how does it vary from geographies? I don't know if Jessica is with us online.
Yes, hello, I'm here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Jessica.
So the first challenge that we still see and that really affects women's access to climate finance is that women are still commonly seen as victims of climate change rather than agents of change that are driving climate action at the front lines. And of course, it's important to recognize that women are disproportionately affected by climate change, So around 80% of current climate refugees are women, and women are 14 times more likely to die than men during climate-related disasters. But they also play, and that is something that is often invisible, they play an extremely important role in combating climate change. And that is important to emphasize as well. So it was really inspiring to see the women activists and entrepreneurs from across the global South that were at COP26, placing a spotlight on the role of women as agents of change, driving climate action and changing that narrative. And that's something that especially resonated with investors and private sector actors, which I found very encouraging to see. So for example, at COP, I shared the stage with Prudence Muchinuta, CFO from Comaco in Zambia, who is spearheading climate action and put a spotlight on bottom-up solution driven by women entrepreneurs like her across Africa. So really advocating to reframe the whole conversation and emphasize the active role that women play as climate smart innovators and entrepreneurs. And there was another inspiring woman from an indigenous community Ecuador, putting a spotlight on the role of women in indigenous communities in Latin America and the Caribbean. So again, showing different local contexts, but emphasizing the role of women. And these are just a few examples. There are many, many others across regions that we've seen. And so the major barrier in that sense is that women are still largely seen as passive, vulnerable groups affected by climate change, instead of having a seat at the table at these high-level climate discussions and also shaping the future of the planet. These women making climate action happen at the front lines have exactly the kind of solutions that key stakeholders at COP and similar fora are looking for, that climate investors and climate finance providers are looking for. But these bottom-up solutions have been largely overlooked because, again, women haven't had a seat at the decision-making table in global climate action and in shaping the design of these climate finance solutions. And that leads me to the second challenge. Climate finance and gender finance have largely operated in silos, and especially climate finance has traditionally lacked a strong gender lens. There are some notable exceptions. And a great example is the Green Climate Fund that really shows how it can be done with an intentional gender lens. But that is still not common across all climate finance and really a missed opportunity, both from a risk perspective, but also from an opportunities perspective. And it's not only a question of equal rights, which of course it is, but it's also really the strong evidence base that gender smart climate finance is much more effective if we want to accelerate climate action. Now, specifically about the barriers women face in accessing climate smart investment and finance, if we look at women entrepreneurs with climate smart business solutions, these women entrepreneurs are often invisible to investors and financial institutions. So they are literally overlooked because of the first challenge that I just described. And so we've seen that women entrepreneurs in general have been underserved and overlooked by finance, but those that are active in climate smart, for example, agriculture or other sectors perceived as higher risk, have been even more excluded from finance. Now, there has been interesting progress with investors working with local financial institutions to design financial products, especially from micro and SME finance with a strong gender lens, really taking into account the specific needs of women entrepreneurs in local contexts. And those are the figures that you just highlighted as the success of the 2X challenge with the 7 billion mobilized and invested. And similarly, there have been financial institutions innovating to develop climate smart financial products. However, these have often not been designed with a gender lens. And again, that's a missed opportunity. So in terms of the biggest gaps and barriers, we see progress. So we see early signs of innovations to develop financial products that are both climate smart and gender smart. So really at this nexus. And this can look differently by geography. For example, a Zambian bank is exploring how they can better serve smallholder farmers with a gender lens and a climate lens, developing new financial products at this gender and climate nexus. And that's because they recognize that climate finance without gender equality won't be as effective as it could be. If women aren't equally involved in climate solutions, climate action will not reach its full potential, and the same is true for climate finance. And so there are initiatives taking off, again, in different regions. We see similar initiatives in Latin America, others focusing on small island development states, others in South and Southeast Asia, in MENA, and also in different sectors where the solutions can vary, for example, in agriculture, in clean tech, in energy, and others. But what they all have in common is that they have this intentional focus of both climate finance and gender equality in more meaningful and intentional ways.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and for pointing out very key messages that sometimes with the disproportionate impact, the vulnerability makes you less of an advocate. On the contrary, it should actually push. And I want to congratulate the UK. It was a very compelling session for gender, and the entrepreneurs were there, the women from the islands advocating what they do and how they affected the community. So it's not just statistics and numbers, but real tangible examples. Your point on finance as well, because the SDG 13 on climate action and SDG 5 are very much connected. And there are so many programs from different finance institutions. So thank you for this insightful communication on the different points. Let me move to Catherine. And Catherine, when we look at the businesses on the business side, what are the identified barriers that you see facing women and girls? And also, what are the biggest barriers that face those who seek jobs in global supply chains? And this is particularly important with everything that's going on now, particularly when different companies are trying to implement commitments to net zero. And also, we always hear about green skills. How is that being integrated? The skills related to training, finance, and anything else that you face as well from a business perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, ministers, for inviting us to speak today. I think this particular topic is hugely important to us, and personally a very close one to my heart. In the context of Primark and our supply chain, our focus has been on those that grow the raw materials. So we think about the impact that we have as a business, the significant amount of emissions sit in Scope 3, and particularly within supply chains that are focused on producing the raw materials, which is why we've put a huge focus on that. I think one of the key things that we've built over the last 10 years is a team on the ground that is reflective of gender and other diversity. And I think that's been really important as we've built our programme, that we've got people within the team who can speak the local language, understand the context, and many of them are females themselves. And I think that really has been critical in the work that we've done and the impact that we've been able to have. It's also about working with the right partners and experts, both at a global and local level. And, particularly when we're looking at projects, it's vital that we have local partners that help and support us, just again, so we really get that local context. And then finally, things like the participating and undertaking in research. And I think the UK government's WOW programme and the toolkit, if only I'd had that sooner when we were starting some of our projects, it's really good. And I would urge everybody to have a look at it if you haven't already. But let me give you a real example in terms of cotton. So a significant amount of the fibre and fabric that we buy for Primark is cotton. Over 50% of our products are made with cotton. So that was really where we started to look at the supply chains, and really having had a look at all the different options of programs that were out there, none of them really ticked the box. What we really wanted to do was make sure that we had a very holistic impact in terms of what we were doing, both from an environmental but a livelihoods point of view. It was really important that it helped us with transparency down our supply chains. And through the conversations that I had with a number of stakeholders, it started to become evident to me that although we wanted to make sure that female farmers were very much front and centre, that there was a distinct risk that unless we did something very proactively, we would end up with a small number of female farmers and a lot more male farmers. So when we started our programme in 2013 in India, we took the decision to just run the program for female farmers in India. And I think at the time, I had quite a lot of raised eyebrows and people thinking, is this really going to work? Are you really going to manage to do this? And I have to say at the outset, when we started to kind of enroll the first 1,200 farmers that we used in the pilot, it was quite challenging to go into communities and say, you know, we're running this program, but it's only for female farmers. But we stuck to our guns. And I think that has been really critical, but we would not have been able to do that without the support, again, back to the critical element of our local partner. So in India, we used an organisation called CSW, the Self-Employed Women's Association. They're the largest female trade union in India. And we partnered them with Cotton Connect, who were the sort of cotton agronomists. So the training of the CSW trainers by Cotton Connect, and all the CSW trainers were female, meant that we started to build real capability and capacity. And then the CSW organisation and association went out and did the training with the farmers. And again, really critical, all local trainers that understood the communities that they were going into, really, really important. But I think the thing that we did learn about that was what you can't do is leave the rest of the community behind. So although we were doing this very sort of focused training with the female farmers, we had to remember there's a wider community, there's the men of the families there that all want to understand what's happening. So we did have to make sure that we were also connecting with those communities. I think as we started to see the success of the program and the impacts of the program, we really started to see that the community started to support the female farmers, because that very much wasn't really the case at the beginning. The training, which is 3-year training, has a big impact on lower use of chemical pesticides for fertilizers, more effective use of water, along with other things, and the higher yields as a result of better agronomic practices meant that farmers' profits increased by over 200% compared to the control farmers. It's really evident when I go back, which I do on an annual basis, although I haven't been there for a couple of years now for obvious reasons, that, you know, you can see how the farmers have flourished. We're now sort of, we started in 2013, we're now sort of, you know, nearly 7 years later, and we've got over 160,000 farmers in the program now. You can see the confidence they have, that sort of knowledge, and also for those farmers imparting that knowledge that they've learned to other farmers who might be growing other crops has been really important. That sense that they're empowered with knowledge. We've even seen some of the female farmers in certain communities become the head of the community, which when that started to happen, I was like, wow, this is about empowerment, because suddenly there's a kind of real value and a real kind of focus on what those farmers are delivering to the community. So I think, you know, I think it's really thinking about how you can set these programs up to make sure that, you know, you have got all these components, you have got that local knowledge, you are talking to people that kind of understand the context in these countries, because that will also, as you build capability, will absolutely help you sort of build scale. We're now at 160,000 farmers, and we're certainly going to be driving that further. But that local knowledge is really going to help you identify what some of those barriers are kind of very early on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And, you know, a few points, the role of the private sector, and, you know, COP is all about stakeholder engagement. So that is truly important, and also scaling. So when programs do, you know, successful outcomes, it's very important to replicate that. And as we have peer-to-peer training on an individual level, also on a firm level, it becomes so important. I don't know if we still have Li Bongjang, or is she off the line completely?
I'm back.
Okay, please go ahead. So we were asking you, about the challenges and what are the biggest barriers you see. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks for letting me come back. So I think from a trade union point of view, what we've observed over the years is the increased precarity of women in the workplace. So what you'll find is that women are often subjected to contract work, labor broking, short time work. So as a result, any changes to their workplace environment that happens as a result of climate change, what you'll find is that it is easier to lay off the woman first. We learned this during the COVID pandemic. When we lost 2 million jobs throughout the pandemic, we noticed that 2/3 of the jobs that were lost belonged to women. And this was really because of the precarity of women in places of work. They are not afforded, decent work. They are not afforded full-time, permanent work. So because of that nature, most of the seasonal jobs in the farms are the jobs that women hold. So if there is a change in weather patterns, if there is a drought, if there is a flood, this will have an impact on the jobs of women, and that will result in them being laid off. So primarily because of the precarity of women in the workplace, we see, the huge impacts of climate change on women. And because, women who are in the rural areas who have to collect wood in order to make their food and feed their families, because women have to, fetch water. If there is a drought, women then have to travel longer distances in order to acquire that water. And that will have, an impact on women in the household. And I think the unpaid care work that women do in the household is also an issue here. So talking about the collection of the firewood and collection of water, that is on top of the work that women have to do on a day-to-day basis. That additional work that they have to do, which is unpaid and it's care work in the household, also has a bit of an impact on women in terms of the impact that climate change would have on jobs. So the increased precarity of women is an issue. The barriers that are there for women to be able to participate meaningfully, in the green economy, I think the biggest one is around skills development and skills acquisition. So if there's going to be initiatives around, a green economy and the creation of green economy, particularly in South Africa, if women continue not to be skilled, it means that women will not be participating in the green economy. Even though we've made great strides as a country, I still do feel that there is still some sectors where certain jobs are meant for women. And that creates a big problem, especially when it comes to meaningfully skilling women. We have no problem giving women administrative skills. We have no problem giving women low-level skills. But when it comes to the actual meaningful skills, the engineering work that is going to go into this economy, that the substantive skills, we often sideline those and place men ahead of women, and we do that. I don't know if it's implicit in the way that we've always dealt with economic activities, but it seems as though unless there's a significant policy push to ensure that women are given the meaningful skills, they're often left on the side. Another issue that is a barrier that we find is that women, even though they have the skills, they are not identified for recruitment as well as promotion in the workplace. And that's a problem. So you'll find that even though women have the skills, they won't acquire the positions in those meaningful skills within the green economy. That is why when we look at our unemployment statistics, or when we look at our skills deficit statistics, we'll find that women are more prone to be unemployed. Women are less prone to be recruited in meaningful jobs in the economy. Women are not likely to be absorbed in those meaningful jobs within the economy. So those remain to be, systematic barriers that women find, particularly in the world of work. I think another issue that is problematic is that, it's so funny that, after so many years, we're still talking about equal pay for work of equal value. So issues pertaining to the gender gap when it comes to pay for women is also a significant barrier. I mean, women can participate meaningfully, they can acquire the skills, they can attempt to participate meaningfully in a green economy, but if they're not going to be paid the same as their male counterparts, it seems like we're taking one step forward but taking 10 steps backwards in essence. And these are the issues that women find problematic, especially when it comes to participating meaningfully in the green economy. I think another thing that we've always highlighted is that, you know, women, and particularly women of color, find it very difficult to participate in the economy, particularly when it comes to opportunities for entrepreneurship. When you look at the statistics, it's very difficult for women to acquire funding. If a woman is a single woman and she is not tied to a spouse and she is applying for, or she's not tied to male business partners and she's trying to apply for business opportunities, it becomes very difficult for that woman to acquire funding. So these are structural barriers to participation and meaningful participation in the economy. I think the last one that's a significant barrier, and we've been hearing a lot about this. We've done a bit of work, especially in the agricultural sector. And what we've always been asking the women, especially in the sector, what becomes, you know, one of the things that they'd like to do. A lot of women in the agricultural sector do have subsistence farming that they do participate in, but that farming is only to feed their families and to sell a bit of crops here and there. But if women were to want to do this on a large scale, they don't have access to land. Land redistribution is not happening in the direction of women. So women who have the skills, who have worked the farms, and who have everything that they need are not acquiring the land. So that becomes a significant problem because land redistribution is not happening, and is not happening in the benefit of women, and that's becoming a serious problem. You know, so we've looked at this, and we've also concluded that there needs to be deliberate policy in order to be able to address, you know, these barriers that are plaguing, you know, women, and this is becoming a barrier to them meaningfully participating in the economy. Some communal land, especially in South Africa, requires you to either be married before you can acquire it. So women on their own cannot acquire large scale land in order to do some sort of, you know, agricultural work or agro processing. So things like that create significant barriers for women. And I think it only happens when, you know, we are very direct and we're purposeful in developing policy in order to break these barriers, because without breaking the barriers, there's no way we're going to be able to ensure that women significantly participate in the economy. It's already difficult to participate in the economy as is. So in the creation of green economies, we have to be purposeful in our development of policy to make sure that we indeed are directing these initiatives towards women participation and meaningfully participating in the economy.
Thank you very much. And thank you for bringing us back to the importance of policy and also for the importance of training and education. I think I want to thank all the panelists because, you know, between finance, between having a voice, between the training, between private sector engagement and the policy that the government does to be able to pave the way for all of this, I think there's a continuous agenda. But one thing which is from experience, when issues are brought to the front in a vocal way and consistently, change does happen. And I think this was one of the outcomes of COP, and I think we continue between now and next November as well. I don't see any hands raised, so I think we can conclude this panel. And before we go to the next panel, there's a video from Mexico on gender and climate change. So let's watch together. Thank you very much for all the participants for the many takeaways.
Good morning. I'm Christopher Ballinas, Director General for Human Rights and Democracy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mexico. I'm really grateful for this event on gender, human rights, climate change, and health. That is exactly the topics that the CSW 66 is focusing on. For the Mexican government, human rights and, of course, gender rights are important matter, and, of course, our priority. We're going to focus especially on this CSW, on pushing forward a progressive agenda on gender rights, and especially the recognition that the negative effects of climate change is imposing on women, girls, and of course, indigenous people. For us, it's important to have this kind of events in order to continue our cooperation with other governments, but also to focus on important matters of gender, rights, and of course, human rights. So thank you very much for sponsoring this event. Back to you.
Was great, and that was a really, really interesting and very thought-provoking first session. So thank you for all the panelists for your deep ideas there, because of course understanding the impact of climate change on women and girls and the unique barriers that they face is a crucial starting point in this discussion, and that forms the foundations for this session. But now we want to discuss the opportunities and the best practices to overcome those barriers. So my first question is for Tamilore. You spoke very clearly about the educational barriers and the skills gap for women and girls. And we know that women and girls need to be equipped with those skills so that they can participate and lead in the green economy. So in your view, what are the key opportunities that are out there to tackle any climate change related barriers, the barriers that are stopping those girls from gaining meaningful education? And also, what could different actors, including the panelists here, what could we all do to enable that, or other actors as well? So over to you, Tamilore.
Thank you, Minister Ford. So I'm just going to use the Malala Fund framework for challenging climate change, and it includes about 4 pillars, which is access, skills, values, and activism. And access talks about providing girls with access to education, 12 years of free and safe education. During their education, they experience gender responsive education. Even the schools are built in such a way that they are very comfortable for girls and boys in the school. The schools are built in such a way that they are built climate friendly, they are made climate friendly. And even in the schools, girls are able to pick up some of the green skills which we are talking about, which will aid them to get green jobs, or which will aid them in a green economy. Also, it's very important to invest in women leaders, very, very important, as we all know that when we have women in decision-making positions, they put into consideration priorities for girls, for women, and for everyone in the society. Actually benefits everyone in the society. People should also invest in researches. There should be more funding for researchers. Yeah, we always talk about climate change, but we need to understand the knowledge gaps in the different geographical locations. The impact of climate change in my community might be different from that in yours. And the challenges or barriers that some of the women in my community are facing may be different from that of yours. And before you could actually provide a solution, you need to provide a very specific solution to my community, so it will work well in my context, and it's not just something they are doing somewhere else and I'm bringing it here and it's not working. Also, there should be an integrated approach to major projects for girls and women's rights. So just for instance, normally when people have projects on, say, health issues, they probably also integrate educational activities into those projects. So now I think we should start looking at also integrating climate change related activities into most of our funding. So at every point in time, we're actually addressing climate change. We're addressing the barriers for climate change. And I forgot to mention that the major root cause of injustice for girls when it comes to climate change is the fact that women are not included. There's exclusion of women in majority of the activities, climate change related activities, community related activities. So women need to be included at every point in time. Girls need to be included at every point in time. We need to hear their voice. We need to understand their perspectives. We need to understand what exactly they need and what exactly they want. I'm just going to end this by saying, not only does the approach for gender equality support girls to realize their education rights and potentially in a climate-affected world, but it is also a powerful strategy in the fight against climate change. So just for literal examples, right now, we're talking about green jobs, green skills. At some point, probably talk about green women, green babies. We should be able to incorporate the knowledge of climate change in everything we are doing. Yes, there are different aspects in the society. There's the sport aspect, there's the health aspect. Yes, so we need to educate people, especially young people from now, to be able to understand that at every aspect you should be thinking about how to better the climate. So yeah, I'm an athlete. I should be thinking about how I can produce climate responsible or climate friendly sneakers, climate friendly sportswears, climate friendly chairs which people sit on at the stadiums. Yeah, I'm an educationist. I should be thinking about, okay, how do I make my school climate friendly? How do I make my home climate friendly? So here in Ibadan, we have a climate change museum. Let me say that. So when you get to this museum, you see a lot of upcycled things. So instead of seeing a chair, a normal plastic chair, you probably see a chair from a sports car, which has been upcycled to be in the museum. Instead of seeing a table, you probably see pallets, which we have a lot of them in the agric industry, in the production industry, and there's really nothing to do about them. Then girls should also think about, okay, we're complaining about the fact that, for instance, nose masks are littering the whole place. In my community, we drink a lot of sachet water. So we have a lot of refuse of sachet water. Girls should be able to have basic knowledge on what to do with these things, how to go about them, and they should be able to have access also to fundings for opportunities and be exposed to opportunities for building or making climate-friendly things just within their immediate environment. Thank you.
Wow, that's a huge number of suggestions there. That's fantastic. I particularly liked you saying, listen to the voices of girls and women. They must be included in everything. I wanted to pick up on what you said about green skills and green jobs. Liberal Gang, as we transition into that green economy, how can we ensure that women and girls are not left behind in those jobs? How do we ensure that women are empowered and that employers see the value that they can bring to their businesses? And how can we encourage that female leadership? What are your views on that?
Thank you, Minister Ford. You know, I think we've passed the stages of making the case that having women in leadership roles in organizations is beneficial to the organization. We're so past that point. It's a known fact. But funny enough, the women are not making it to those positions. So after making the point, I think it's now time to put in quotas. To be quite honest, we need to start putting certain levels and saying that, you know, at this level, we require this amount of women in a particular position, especially in the green economy. I don't see it happening any other way. We can't rely on the goodwill of other players in the private sector. There are players who see the need, but to be quite honest, we're not getting the message across on the scales that we need in order to bring women into the sector and to ensure that there's significant and sufficient women participation. So I think at some point we're going to have to agree on what the sectoral targets are going to have to look like in the green economy, so that we place quotas to make sure that, at this level, this is how many women we want to participate in this particular sector. I think that's the only way we're going to, achieve the participation that we want from women. In my society, and because of, the legacies of our past in South Africa, women have not participated meaningfully in the economy. And the only way to bring about the participation that we want, we need to put in employment equity. We need to put in quotas, and we need to put in, certain just to ensure that, we bring in the number of women and prioritize women. I think here we are just going to have to prioritize women and say that, we want women to participate in this economy. They have the value. If we've given them the skills, we believe that they can provide the value that is necessary for this economy. We know what happens when women hold the money. We know what happens when women earn money. That money is going to the household. It's going to produce better education outcomes for children. It's going to make sure that children have better outcomes, better performance, better nutrition, better human development index for generations to come. So if the industries are not absorbing the women at the rate that we'd like, I think, we're going to have to consider the option of imposing quotas on certain industries. We don't like to provide a stick to industries. We'd like to provide a carrot, but if it's not moving fast enough, the stick and the carrot will have to intersect at some point. On another level, we need to ensure that there's a universal basic income grant. Social protection is going to be vital in our transition to the green economy. We know that a lot of women are engaged in unpaid labor in the household. So as we're trying to transition, we're going to need to provide some sort of cash transfer, particularly for women who are engaged, to make sure that this work that they're doing in the household is actually paid work. On the issue of reskilling and upskilling, we're going to do the same thing that we do for jobs. We're going to have to give guarantees to women to ensure that they will be prioritized for skilling and upskilling. What I mentioned in the beginning is that, it's still this case that some jobs are meant for men. And we're not breaking that barrier. So what we need to make sure is that when it comes to skilling, we give government subsidies, we give educational bursaries directed to women, but we just make sure that we guarantee the participation of women in this sector. I've spent a lot of time talking about land redistribution, but again, we're going to have to ensure that through policy, we make sure that as we redistribute land, we put it purposefully in the hands of women so that they'll be able to cultivate the land. I think another thing that's going to be important, a just transition is a tricky thing to bring about. Transitions happen all the time. They're very easy to bring about. But when you start engaging in the process of a just transition, you must know that you're addressing a social issue here. So that requires government to participate. Government is going to have to invest in its women. So government is going to, so these bursaries that we're talking about for women to upskill themselves, it would be nice if the private sector will come in and play a part, but to be quite honest, a large amount of it is going to come from government, because this is their country's imperative in order to achieve. So land redistribution for women, changing industrial policy to make sure that we prioritize women. The government is going to have to invest in that capacity to make sure that that happens. We're going to have to partner with the private sector. I've heard great things from the private sector in this call, and I think the private sector is going to have to start to gear their focus and their attention towards women. I've just reviewed employment equity numbers in South Africa, and still at top management positions favor men. Senior management favors men. Middle management favors men. Women only start to participate at an unskilled, semi-skilled, and a lower skilled participation and occupational level. So the private sector is going to have to now seriously commit to women empowerment. And we don't do that only in a green economy. We start to do this now in the economy that we're currently participating in, because that becomes the gradual transition to a just transition where women are significantly participating in the economy. So the private sector has a role to play. Trade unions, we're playing our role, and I believe civil society is already playing their role. Government is going to have to invest in its women. And this is how I believe we bring women with us as we transition to a low carbon economy.
Thank you, Lebagang. Jessica, I thought you made a very interesting point earlier about investment when you said that gender smart investment has better outcomes. I think you said that there was evidence for that. And from your experience on 2Times, what opportunities are there for gender smart climate financing? How do we get interest from other investors to build the momentum for that, especially if you've got that evidence that it has better outcomes?
Yeah, thank you so much, Minister. And as you mentioned in the introduction, the TUX Collaborative is a global industry body for gender lens investing, convening the entire spectrum of investors and capital providers. So the good news is we already have them kind of in our circle, and we're widening the circle now and bringing on many more different types of investors across geographies, sectors, financial instruments, together to really drive change. And we have jointly defined gender smart climate finance as one of our priority areas in the TUX Collaborative, given the strong nexus between gender and climate goals. We are convinced and have seen the growing research showing that this nexus between gender equality and climate action is really at the key to change, to meaningful transformation. And so we cannot achieve gender goals without climate action, and we cannot achieve climate goals without gender equality. And that's what's really driving our work. We then saw that it's, even when people recognize this and know these studies, it's still hard to translate it into kind of tangible action that it speaks to investors and that really allows them to see how to do it in practice. And so we launched some time ago a gender and climate task force, and they co-created over the course of last year a gender smart climate finance toolkit that we then launched at COP26 in Glasgow in November. And this toolkit provides extensive guidance and practical tools and relevant case studies to support investors and capital providers to integrate gender into their climate finance investments. So it dives deeper into the why, the what, and the how of gender and climate finance. And importantly, summarizes all of this research and the evidence base, and then translates that into real investment approaches and how to actually do it. The guide speaks to 4 of the 5 priority areas under the UNFCCC Gender Action Plan, and it also answers to all 4 action areas of the Feminist Action for Climate Justice. So to summarize, supporting investors to identify opportunities for gender and climate financing will increase direct access to financing for gender just climate solutions, in particular for women and girls at the grassroots level. Then through the case studies in the guide, they really showcase examples of how gender smart investments can enable women and girls to lead a just transition to a green economy. Then thirdly, by making women part of the solution, which we've heard on this panel, which is really important, it will also build the resilience of women and girls to climate impacts, disaster risks, loss and damages, by making sure that their perspective is at the center of designing solutions. And then finally, helping investors to mainstream gender in their climate finance investments will increase the collection and the use of data on the gender and environmental nexus and further build the evidence base also directly related to investments. This guide and toolkit features 11 sector-specific and thematic guidance notes on a range of sectors such as energy, agriculture, manufacturing, infrastructure, and financial services, and also thematic areas like adaptation, mitigation, green jobs, and biodiversity. So it's really diving deep into specific contexts and into sectors and into these thematic areas. And we have really aimed to address a lot of these challenges and really the structural barriers and biases that my fellow panelists have just highlighted. This toolkit, as I mentioned, was launched at COP. It received very positive feedback from capital providers and mobilizers. And the TUX Collaborative has now just formed a new community of practice, including other types of investors that's really focusing on the practical implementation of the toolkit. So over the coming months, we will support the spectrum of investors across regions and sectors with peer learning sessions, practical trainings, and sharing of more project examples and case studies. And so This is something that we're very excited about because it's so action driven. But as we've also heard from the fellow panelists, it will be really key to also see how, as part of these solutions, we are including the women's and girls' perspectives. We are breaking down these barriers, the glass ceiling that we've heard, but also these occupational and sectoral gender gaps that are persisting, and that we're constantly evaluating and making sure that it's really, because it's such a complex challenge, that all of these different barriers that have been highlighted are part of the solutions and that we're steering accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's great. And then my last question is to you, Catherine. I think we all loved hearing about what you've done with the women cotton farmers. Are there other examples of best practice from your experience in retail and manufacturing, in business, that you would like to share with us about how to ensure that women do fully participate in the economy? And what are the most helpful things that government can do, that civil society can do, that investors can do to help us in that work? Over to you.
Thank you. I think one of the key things, and I'd like to mention again, that we worked with the UK government Work and Opportunities for Women WOW programme in the development of a toolkit for businesses on gender and climate. And, it's a great resource. It's got some really clear guidance around strategy thinking, and also some great links to real examples of what business has done. So I'd kind of definitely urge you to look at that. I've mentioned the Primark Sustainable Cotton Programme, and we've talked about the experience of that. The one thing that I'd say to anybody that's sitting there thinking this sounds like a huge challenge is to get started. We've got a huge number of farmers there. The ripple effect of the work that you can do across generations should not be underestimated, and much of the sort of benefit, not only environmentally, but in terms of incomes we're seeing flow into education for the farmers' families, and don't ever underestimate that. We've also seen the farmers start to work together and take the sort of the things that they've learned, but actually take them to a next level without a huge amount of extra support for us. Now they've got that level of education that really helps them understand practices. Particularly the farmers in India are now creating their own bio-based input centres, where they're starting to create their own pest control solutions out of plants and materials that they're then choosing to sell into their communities. We've got other examples where we've put education programs, particularly around skills, into factories, and we've seen real progress made there. I think one of the real interesting challenges that we found with that particular program, which was around skills in factories, was we had some of the female workers that were going through the program showed real promise at actually moving up to more senior levels into supervisory roles. And actually one of the challenges that we came across was, factories willing to do that, but also accepting that, if it didn't work out, there would be a safety net there. But actually challenges from within families that actually the male, the husbands, not too keen that their wives were going to maybe step up into supervisory roles. So I think what we've also got to remember is it's the context of what sits around, whether it's around the factory or in the community, that we've also got to sort of consider those elements. I think in terms of, the roles in terms of government, civil society and investors can play, I think it for farmers, building resilience is going to be key. And I think this enabling more access to financial instruments, whether it's insurance, education, or R&D on better seeds and inputs, is going to be really important. And I think that the comment around women's land tenure is also something that's really critical here. I think governments and financial institutions have a key role kind of in creating the enabling environment. And I'd like to see sort of more partnership, with private sector, government, and sort of investing institutions on how we can work together to really drive more positive change at scale, because I think there are some real opportunities there. And I know I'd like to add, we're working with the WOW project now on further research to look at the impact of climate change with our female farmers that we have in Pakistan. We're now operating the program in 3 countries. Where we're already seeing significant impacts of climate change, and I think this research is important. And then I just sort of pick up one of the other comments from one of the other panelists was in relation to this unpaid work. I think we should never kind of underestimate this element of unpaid work, and it should be a dimension that we think about, whatever the program is, because it's often completely missed, and it's important that we consider that as well. So thank you.
That's incredibly helpful. Sorry, I'm being completely technologically useless here, not taking myself off mute. And I was trying to share in the chat the link to the WOW program, but I've gone and shared the link to the Zoom meeting to get into this call. So that was a bit useless, but I will try and do that. We had hoped to have some time for some of the panelists to cross-examine each other, but I think it's going to be a bit short of time, but I just wanted to say thank you so much, all of you, for everything that you are doing. It is making a huge difference, and we've got to keep pressing on this agenda. It's been a really enriching discussion. It's given us all inspiration for what we can do as individually and collectively for the next steps. Whilst the wonderful Dr. Al-Mashat does closing remarks, I'm going to go and find that link and get it in the chat so that we can share that WOW program with others. Over to you, Dr. Al-Mashat. I can't see you on the screen, so I hope you're there to just do some concluding remarks. Thank you, and good luck with the next COP.
Thank you so much, Minister Vicky, and thank you for co-hosting this, asking me to co-host. And I really want to thank all the panelists, because it's very difficult to give closing remarks with all the food for thought and the very productive agenda that has been put ahead of us. When we look at the gender element, whether it's in government policy, in private sector policy, with civil society and within communities, it is not just an afterthought, it is an integral element of progress going forward. And we are in the month of women. March is the month of women and gender equality. And one very key item is that women's participation is macro-critical, and it's macro-critical in different sectors. And as we talk about the green transition for different countries all over the globe, as it affects citizens, as it affects government's investments, as it affects private sector expansion, we have to very much focus on how we weave in and mainstream gender and climate into the different investments. And we heard that from the panelists. Something else which is extremely important is on the education and skills side. And in order to empower women and put them on at the seat around the table, again, this was one of the key items that was mentioned as well. Something else which is extremely important is that the different SDGs also empower women. So as we're talking about climate, which is SDG number 13, the other SDGs are also quite intertwined, and they all contribute to SDG number 5. And I just wanted to seize this opportunity to welcome the progress that was made at COP26 in Glasgow on the gender agenda. It was a very important event. All the points that were mentioned today were also tangibly shown in case studies, actual women in their community speaking about not just the barriers, but the opportunities they created. And this opens the appetite because it means that scalability is there. Our COP is going to follow as well from Glasgow to Sharm el-Sheikh with these key components. Again, whether it is from commitment to action, adaptation and resilience, at the heart of all of this is the gender component. As the panelists mentioned, women will not be the victim, but actually the agent of change, and that is really what we want to push forward. So, at the end, I just want to conclude by saying that building stronger engagements with everyone, be it the private sector, civil society, development partners. I was just in the UK and we met with CDC, and there's so much happening on gender there with World Bank, with EBRD, with the African Development Bank. So development community, the international community, along with governments, along with the private sector, there's so much to be able to influence the green transition, make it a just transition. And when we say just, it's not just between countries, but just between the genders within the different communities. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate and co-host. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you, Minister Ford, for giving us this opportunity. Again, the beginning of many series until we reach November in Sharm el-Sheikh, so that we can together formulate a practical and operational way forward for gender and climate change. Thank you very much.